If we are not free to choose, then we can't create meaning. All of this left people asking, if there is no God, no predetermined purpose, no essential human nature, then what are we supposed to do with ourselves? How free are you if your desires themselves have been shaped by forces you can't see? There is a moment in Albert Camus' novel The Stranger where the protagonist realizes something that chills him to the bone. Not that he is going to die, not that life is meaningless, but something far more unsettling. That he could have chosen differently. That every single moment of his life, every decision that led him to that prison cell, was entirely his own doing. No fate, no God, no grand design pushed him there. Just him, just his choice. And maybe that's the most terrifying realization of all. So I'm here with some thoughts about existentialism and Jean-Paul Sartre, and why he believed that if we truly understood what freedom means, we will be absolutely terrified. Because freedom, according to Sartre and other existentialists, isn't the comfortable notion we tell ourselves it is. It's not about doing whatever we want or breaking free from constraints. Real freedom is something much darker actually, much more demanding. It's the crushing weight of realizing that you are entirely, completely and inescapably responsible for who you are. So let's talk briefly on what existentialism actually is and why freedom sits at its very heart. Existentialism emerged in the 20th century as response to a world that seemed to have lost its meaning. Let's remind us, 2 world wars, the collapse of traditional religious authority, the rise of industrial society. All of this left people asking, if there is no God, no predetermined purpose, no essential human nature, then what are we supposed to do with ourselves? The existentialists had a radical answer. We create our own meaning. We don't discover our purpose, we choose it. We don't find our true selves. We make ourselves through our actions and decisions. Here is the crucial point of that. None of this is possible without freedom. If we are not free to choose, then we can't create meaning. If our actions are predetermined, then we can't be responsible for who we become. Freedom isn't just one aspect of existentialism. It's actually the foundation that makes everything else possible. This is why Sartre said we are condemned to be free. We didn't ask for this freedom, but we have it whether we want it or not. And once we have it, we can't escape the responsibility that it comes with it. Every moment we are choosing who to be. Every action, every decision, every thought also is creating the person we are. Traditional philosophy often asks, what is human nature? Existentialism asks, what will you make of yourself? So the difference is everything. So existentialism's entire philosophical project hinges on one massive assumption, that we actually have free will. And that assumption is far from settled today. Think about it for a moment. If determinism is true, if every thought, decision, every action is just the inevitable result of prior causes stretching back to the beginning of time, then existentialism collapses. If your brain is just a biological machine following the laws of physics, then all this talk about choosing yourself, creating meaning, and taking responsibility becomes meaningless. You are not choosing anything. You are just playing out a script written by the universe itself. So modern neuroscience has made this problem even more acute. Studies suggest that our brains begin preparing for actions before we are consciously aware of deciding to act. Our sense of free will might be an illusion, a story we tell ourselves after the fact to make sense of what our brains have already decided to do. One of the examples is the book by Robert Sapolsky, Determined. But here's what makes this so fascinating. Sartre and the existentialists were writing at a time when the scientific challenges were just beginning to emerge. They intuited something that science is still grappling with. That free will is simultaneously the most obvious thing about human experience and the most philosophically problematic. We feel free, that's a fact. Every moment of every day, we experience ourselves as agents making choices. When you decided to watch this video, it felt like a choice, I hope. When you form opinions, make plans, or change your mind, it feels like genuine agency. But feelings, of course, can be deceiving. This creates existentialism's central paradox. The entire philosophy depends on something that might not exist. If free will is an illusion, then we are not condemned to be free. We are condemned to think we are free while actually being trapped in the illusion of choice. But maybe this very illusion is just enough. Yet here is where existentialism gets clever. Even if free will is problematic, even if it might be an illusion, we can't live as if it doesn't exist. We can't help but experience ourselves as choosing beings. We can't escape the feeling of responsibility for our actions. So perhaps the question isn't whether we are truly free, but what we do with the experience of freedom, real or not. And this is what makes Sartre's philosophy so urgent and so unsettling. He's asking us to take seriously something we can't prove, our own agency, and to build our entire approach to life around it. It's sort of a philosophical leap of faith, Kierkegaard, but one that might be unavoidable if you want to live authentically as human beings. Here's Sartre's first devastating insight that might be helpful in this discussion. You don't have a true self waiting to be discovered. There's no authentic you hidden beneath layers of social conditioning waiting to emerge. You don't find yourself. You create yourself, choice by choice, action by action. And I understand that it's contrary to some common conceptions about this topic, and against the idea of finding your true nature or finding yourself or knowing yourself. Think about this for a moment. When someone asks, "Who are you?" what do you say? You might mention your job, your relationships, your hobbies, or other social functions. But Sartre would push back. Those aren't who you are. Those are things you have chosen to do and be. And you could choose differently tomorrow. For example, you can tomorrow change your job or your spouse. Maybe not the best idea. This is what he meant when he said existence precedes essence. You exist first as a conscious being capable of choice. Everything else, like your personality, your values, identity, comes after that, built through your decisions and actions. It's like being handed a blank canvas and realizing that not only do you have to paint something, but whatever you paint will be called you for the rest of your life. Except here's the catch. You can always paint over it. You can always choose differently. The canvas is never truly finished. And to be fair, maybe Sartre thought about this tabula rasa idea that we are just empty canvases at the beginning of our lives. But today we need to acknowledge many different determinants like genetic, behavioral, social, that inevitably have influence on you and the way you will make choices in the future. This doesn't mean that there is no free will. This just means that you can have some predispositions to act. And this all might sound liberating at first, this tabula rasa idea. Not predetermined destiny, no fixed nature holding you back. But Sartre understood that this kind of radical freedom is actually terrifying. Because if you are constantly creating yourself, then you are constantly responsible for what you create. There's no one else around to blame. This brings us to one of Sartre's most important concepts, but faith. And I actually have a whole video just about that. This is the way we lie to ourselves to escape the burden of freedom. We pretend we are not free. We act as if our roles and identities are fixed, unchangeable facts about who we are. The waiter who says, "I'm a waiter," as if that defines his entire being. The mother who claims, "I had no choice but to sacrifice everything for my children." The student who insists, "I'm just naturally bad at math." Not true. These are all examples of bad faith, pretending that we are what we are, rather than acknowledging that we choose to be what we are. Bad faith is like seductive because it offers relief from the weight of constant choice. It's easier to say, this is just who I am, than to admit, this is who I have chosen to be, and I could choose differently. But here's what Sartre understood. Even choosing bad faith is a choice. Even deciding to pretend you are not free is an exercise of your freedom, and you can't escape it. You can only lie to yourself about it. And maybe you are now thinking, but surely there are constraints on our freedom. What about poverty, discrimination, illness, trauma? Sartre acknowledged these limitations, but he argued that even with constraints, we always have some element of choice about how we respond. The prisoner can choose to resist or collaborate. The poor person can choose bitterness or resilience. The victim can choose to be defined by what happened to them or to define themselves in spite of it. This doesn't mean these choices are easy or that all choices are equal. It means that even in our most constrained moments, some element of freedom remains. And that remaining freedom is both precious and terrifying. Sartre had a word for the feeling that comes with recognizing your radical freedom. Nausea. Not physical sickness, but a kind of existential vertigo. The dizzying realization that nothing is stopping you from becoming anything. Nothing is forcing you to remain who you are. And this concept was explicated in his novel called Nausea. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. You feel a strange pull. Not because you want to jump, but because you realize you could jump. Nothing is physically preventing you to jump. That moment of recognizing your own terrible freedom, that's what Sartre called the vertigo of freedom. And this connects to something crucial about existentialism that we need to understand. So, as we agreed, freedom is the foundation for existentialism. So without this radical human freedom, there would be no authentic choice, no self-creation, no genuine responsibility. But the same freedom that makes authentic existence possible is also what makes existence so difficult to bear. The existentialist embraces this paradox. Yes, freedom is the source of our deepest anxiety. Yes, it would be easier to believe we are not responsible for who we are. But this freedom is also what makes us human. It's what allows for genuine love between people, authentic relationships, meaningful choices, and moral responsibility. The terror and the beauty are inseparable. So later thinkers, also French thinkers, like Michel Foucault, would challenge Sartre's vision of radical freedom by pointing out the ways that social structures shape us before we are even aware of making choices. Foucault argued that power operates through institutions like schools, hospitals, prisons, military, that create subjects who believe they are free while actually being controlled. Think about it. How many of your deepest beliefs about success, relationships, or happiness were really chosen by you versus absorbed from the culture around you? So for example, this famous American idea of living on suburbs, having a large house, 2 children, a dog, 2 cars, and a wife, of course. How free are you if your desires themselves have been shaped by forces you can't see? This creates a fascinating tension. Sartre says you're radically free and responsible for who you are. Foucault suggests you are more control than you realize, shaped by power structures that make you complicit in your own subjugation. That's also why Foucault pursued personally more extreme social lifestyle that was more free from those social constraints. Maybe the truth includes elements of both. Maybe we are freer than Foucault suggests, but less free than Sartre believed. Maybe recognizing the ways we are shaped by social forces is itself a kind of freedom, the beginning of authentic choice. But even if Foucault is right, then we are more constrained than we think. Sartre's basic insight remains powerful. But even if Foucault is right, then we are more constrained than we think. Sartre's basic insight remains powerful. Within whatever freedom we do have, we bear responsibility for what we do with it. So what do we do with this? How do we live with the knowledge that we are constantly creating ourselves? that we are responsible for who we become, that our freedom is both our burden and our gift. Sartre, of course, didn't offer easy answers, because he didn't believe there were any. He didn't think there was a correct way to live or a predetermined path to follow. That's precisely the point. If there were easy answers, we wouldn't be truly free. It just must be your choice. But he did believe that acknowledging our freedom, even its terrifying aspects, was better than living in bad faith. He thought that recognizing our responsibility for ourselves was the beginning of authentic existence, even if authentic existence is harder than the alternative. This doesn't mean we have to carry this weight alone. Sartre's relationship with Simone de Beauvoir showed him that freedom could be shared, that we could choose to be free together. We can support each other in the difficult work of authentic self-creation. And just on the note, they created one of the first open relationships. At least one of the first open relationships that we know about. And maybe that's enough. Maybe recognizing that we are all struggling with the same fundamental challenge, so how to be human in a world that doesn't tell us how to be human, creates a kind of solidarity. We are all standing at the edge of the same cliff, feeling the same vertigo, making the same impossible choices about who to become. Why does this matter now, in our current moment? Because we live in a time when the illusion of predetermined paths is breaking down. Traditional career paths, relationship models, and social structures are all being questioned. We have more apparent freedom than previous generations, but also more anxiety about how to use that freedom. Things like social media shows us infinite possibilities for who we could be, but also infinite ways to feel inadequate about who we are. We are constantly curating ourselves, presenting versions of ourselves, choosing which self to perform now in this post or in this video. Sartre's insights about self-creation and bad faith feel more relevant than ever because of that. The climate crisis, political upheaval, and technological change all force us to confront questions about who we want to be and what kind of world we want to create. These aren't just personal questions, they are collective ones. How do we exercise our freedom responsibly when our choices affect not just ourselves, but future generations? Sartre reminds us that even in the face of these massive challenges, we are not powerless. Quite the contrary. We still have choices, even if they are difficult ones. We still have the responsibility to create ourselves and our world, even if the task feels overwhelming. I want to leave you with this thought. Maybe the terror of freedom isn't something to be overcome. Maybe it's something to be acknowledged, accepted, even embraced. Maybe the fact that you feel overwhelmed by your choices, by your responsibility for who you become, means you are finally taking your freedom seriously. You're not a fixed thing. You are not predetermined. You are not trapped by your past or your circumstances in the way you might think you are. You're constantly becoming, constantly choosing, constantly creating the person you are. This is terrifying. It's also beautiful. It's the human condition in all its difficulty and possibility. The question isn't whether you are free. Sartre would say you have no choice but to be free. The question is what you will do with that freedom, knowing that whatever you choose, it's yours to choose. And speaking of choice and self-creation and existentialism, if you're interested in exploring more about how philosophers have questioned the very idea of stable self, I've created a video about Heidegger and his radical challenge to our assumptions about personal identity. You can watch it here. I think it's a fascinating complement to Sartre's ideas about freedom and self-creation. And that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, consider giving me a like and a subscription if you would like to see more videos like this in the future. If you have any questions or comments, the comment section is for you. Thank you for watching once again, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.